Welcome. We're gonna be going through, like, not only was the guest, like, key speaker amazing, but we also wanted to be able to like break it down and so that you guys can learn from our mistakes and also not put in all of the time to find out that it doesn't work. So please, like, as we talk about things, you'd be more than welcome to like ask questions, like throw out input, what you've tried, what you haven't. Like, we are more up here to just like jazz and have a conversation than versus like just going through our PowerPoints. As you'll see, we only have a couple.
So I kind of fanboyed Jesse a little bit after his presentation because I started with Paulo Freire and bell hooks as well before I knew Jesse, and then when I found Jesse's book, a lot of the stuff that I do now is kind of closely tied to his work. So I'm citing him now in case anybody wants to know. He is influential in what you're going to hear us talk about. But it was really cool to have him here, and we're hoping to get some time at the end to talk about some insights that maybe you had from that or questions that you had. And he didn't have a lot of time at the end to get into some more specifics about assignments and things like that. And maybe we can, if that's useful, do that when we have some time at the end. So, but you can see, just looking at this slide, our philosophies of ungrading, you can see kind of elements. I was taking notes during Jesse's thing. I'm like, yeah, we say that in our slide, we say that in our slide, or some piece of that, right? So we're just going to talk a little bit about why we do what we do before we get into the confessions of what just did not work at all. And it doesn't mean it won't work for you, because you might have a different context, and maybe it was the context is why things didn't work. But we're going to start with what didn't work, and then really what has been probably the foundation of what does work for us.
So what got me into this, even the realm of ungrading, was actually JC. So I blame him fully, but also I have to give him credit fully. So when I actually start looking at like what was my pedagogy and teaching, like what was I like looking for in my assessments, I wanted to look and really focus on like the process of learning. When I was looking at my 4-year-old, when she was starting to crawl, like I didn't expect her to like jump up and run. Oh, I'm in social work.
Yeah,
both in social work.
Sorry.
Nope.
Yeah, no.
That's okay.
You could just tell. A group hug at the end.
Yeah, no, and I teach on the bachelor's level and on the master's level too. So like my classes range from like your breadth courses up to like master's levels. So yeah, so but really the focus is like I don't expect babies to start running without falling and making those mistakes. So I wanted to bring that same idea into the classroom of I don't want it to be punitive when my students are making mistakes. Also, I don't want to be thinking about like the justification of a 98 to a 99 and then having the students like emailing you and being like, well, why didn't I get a 99? And it's like, you still got an A. And it's okay. So really like changing that focus of, instead of the focus being on like the grade and the points and the monotony, really changing to the process of like, it's okay, let's celebrate failure, and let's also be able to get you to learn the process, which then really helps the students be more engaged. And they tend to freak out at the beginning, but then they kind of like, oh, this is really cool.
So for me, there's an Aboriginal woman in Australia, Lila Watson, and I came across this random quote early on in my, I've been here for 5 years as full-time faculty. I've been at the university for a lot longer. But it says to the effect that if you come here to help me, you've come to the wrong place. If you come to work beside me, let us help each other. It's that idea of co-liberation, like as we learn from each other. And Jesse talked about that. We kind of rotate. There's moments when your students are teaching you amazing things, or you're reading some of their work and you're like, I've never thought about it that way. That ties to this and that connects to this. And so I'm really into that idea of Paulo Freire, the pedagogy of the oppressed, is what I'm trying to do as a social work instructor is raise the collective consciousness so that we can take effective action. So raise everybody's awareness of how the world is so then we can go problem solve and we can be effective in that. Versus that banking model of come, sit at my feet, listen to what I have to tell you, and then you'll know everything that you need to know, because I don't know what I need to know still, right? It's that interchange of information. So Jesse talked about that, and he talked a lot about extrinsic to intrinsic motivation. I think where I first started getting into this is that first semester I was here, I spent a lot of my weekends trying to decide what was a 97, what was a 95, what was a 94, what was a 93. And inevitably, anybody that didn't get the 97, took me 20 minutes to tell them why they didn't get a 97, why they got a 95 instead. And it was so frustrating because I'm like, there's really not that big of a difference. And so it challenged my own idea, but like most of you likely, I grew up in the banking model of education. I got really good at multiple choice tests. I don't remember much of my bachelor's degree content, but I know I had the top score on a lot of tests. Yay, right? I played the game. I got really good at playing that game. And I was, as now an instructor, I got really, really frustrated with spending my time continuing that game, where a student would be very anxious, not to make fun of it, but very anxious about a 94 instead of a 97, which was still an A, because they had been so trained in the banking model that that was failure to them, that they didn't have that higher point value. So I really started looking around for better ways to do this, and I came across the work of Jesse and others. But it's this idea of really rethinking grading to assessment. How do we assess? Right? I think ungrading is kind of that clickbait title. Like, it's like, well, ungrading, I thought, well, you can't not grade somebody, right? How does that even work? So we did that with the Confessions of Two Ungraders, another clickbait title, like some dark confession about this. But, and it's that not everything works, right? So when we tried to implement that philosophy that Jesse talked about, we did a lot of things poorly, unskillfully at first, because to go back to the being a student, we hadn't learned everything that we needed to learn yet. So we had to go through that failure process. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things. But I wanted to thank you for giving context, because we are in social work, and context matters in this field. The type of class you teach, the profession you're in, the size of it, the modality of it, whether it's connected. There's a lot of nuance to all of this. So something that didn't work for me in my graduate seminar, kind of 24 or 30 people, could actually work really well in a larger survey class potentially. So what didn't work for us could still work for you, but we're going to tell you some of the lessons we learned.
So my biggest struggle was that I ate the whole elephant in like one semester, and I was like, I am getting away from grades. I don't care. Everything's 1 point. Like, we're done. And it was for an online asynchronous class. So I had probably around 50 students in the class, and you don't have like the opportunity in a class to like see them engaging with the material and getting the point. They would see in the assignment that it was like everything was worth 1 point. So if they missed something, then they were like, okay, it was just 1 point. And so I wasn't able to connect with them on that platform as in depth as I needed to. And so when they didn't turn in an assignment, I was like, this has a bigger impact on your grade. Like, just because I'm saying we're doing ungrading doesn't mean that you're not going to have a grade at the end of the semester. It's just, so it was taking on too much and then not understanding how to like explain what I was doing and to have that like translate to the students. So here I was teaching this class online, and I'm trying to like change the assignments, trying to connect with students still not quite like understanding. And I realized, okay, this is not working. And I had to like pull back and really reanalyze. But that was definitely like one of the biggest mistakes, and I feel bad for that cohort. And I've gone back, and I've like in many of the announcements, it was like, I apologize for this confusion, because I wanted them to know that like this was something that I'm trying, and I'm not communicating fully. So there was many chances where I had to like reconnect with the students, and some students don't even read those announcements. So again, that was a little bit more complicated. I've learned, and we'll talk about the things that works well now, but that was basically one of my biggest hurdles, was getting rid of points, applying it to a course, and applying anything I heard and read about of ungrading all at once. Don't do that.
How many of you have done learning circles through ETE? Okay. If you haven't, they're fantastic. I got addicted to them and did like 2 every semester for a long time, and it was really I was overdoing it. But imagine this, your professor goes to a learning circle in September and comes to class in October and says, I'm going to like get rid of points. Because I got really excited reading that book, and it wasn't Jesse's book; it was a book by Susan Bloom, and you've grown up 25 years in the banking model of education, and this hippie social worker comes in and is like, "No points. We're just gonna learn to learn," and they're just like, panic, anxiety attacks, just a nightmare, right? And I was so enthusiastic that they at least heard me out. I said, let's just try it. Let's just try it. And every week I'm like, we're going to do this. And it ended up okay. The reflections at the end of the semester, everybody, we got to where we needed to go. But I feel bad for that cohort as well, because I unleashed everything at them all at once because I was so excited. Because like, this is about teaching for learning, and we're going to assess for learning. And they're like, what do I need to do to get an A? And I'm like, no, that's not the point. We're here to learn, right? So I had really high expectations of how this would just, how was I going to undo 25 years of everybody's training? And I had been trained in the same system. But I did too much too soon, and I had an incomplete understanding of the purpose of why I was even doing the changes. I just knew I was excited and it felt like the good direction to go. But like Jesse said, you've got to, it's a whole philosophy of how you teach. It's not just the idea of what's in your syllabus. It's not just this assignment has this many points. It's like, how do I look at each of my assignments and really assess, does this actually have value for learning? That's the first step. And if it doesn't, why do I have it in here? It should not be there if it's not reinforcing some skill development, some learning that's fundamental to the course. And then the next step is like, how in the world do we measure whether somebody learned that? Right? That's the next piece. And so you start to get into like, okay, how do I structure this assignment? We'll talk about some details of that in a little bit. But I had this whole idea of like, we're going to go no points, or we're going to go very little points. And it made my focus and the students' focus still on points. It was just the absence of points that we were all obsessing over. So it was complete, the same dynamic. It was just now, instead of worrying how many points, it's worrying how little points. And so it really got me stuck in that same banking model and that same kind of trap. And so it wasn't until I realized that, and a lot of conversations with colleagues like, man, this bombed, this totally bombed, why did this bomb? And then you get that insight from other people. A couple of examples that we'll talk a little bit about, and Julie can come in again on some of these. Jesse talked about some of these too, and they can work, but you need to know why you're doing it. I did the incomplete, complete, so just you turn it in, you get complete, incomplete. Canvas makes you assign points in that even. You can do incomplete, complete, but it still has to have a point value in the grade book. That might have changed then, since I did it. You still had to put a 0 in there. Well, you don't have to display it as points. You can display it as complete, incomplete, but it still tracks. It still has to be a 0, 1. It's still on the back end, of the database, because that's how they calculate the grade automatically. So that was frustrating, because students would see it complete and go look at their percentages, and their percentages would be like wonky, right? So it was, again, focusing on points, not it was doing the opposite. We weren't focusing on learning. I did what Jesse said. I tried everything. Julie talked about this. Everything's worth 1 point because it's all important. That was the intent. And they saw, it's 1 point. I don't have to do that 30-page paper this weekend because it's 1 point. Opposite of what we were trying to accomplish with that one. I did try the 1 to 4 point scale. Like you get a 4 if it's well done. 3, it could be better, but you don't have to resubmit it. 2, you need to do some work and resubmit it. And 1, let's talk, is kind of how I did that. That was still a little confusing for students. That's probably more about how I implemented it. I think I could go back to that one and be more successful. Do you have thoughts on those?
What I ended up doing, instead of like how I corrected the points for me, was that it still had the points assigned to it, but the way that I explain the points is basically to give them a guide on how much time I'm expecting them to use for that assignment. So with our weekly like reading reflection papers, that's 10 points. I don't want you to spend hours on that reflection. I just want you to be able to do the reading and then sit down and punch out the paper or the reflection. So it's only 10 points. But at the end of the semester with our big end of projects, those are like 200 points. But then again, I'm letting them know the points are associated with how much time I'm giving you. And we're going to be able to have feedback as we move through. So then that way, if you see that I'm giving you less, like it's more of a guiding. So then that way, if there's something that they need to revise, I let them know this is the part where you need to revise and resubmit. And I give them a 0, so then that way they know that I actually gave them feedback. And then if they choose to resubmit it, that's on them. If they choose not to, then the 0 just kind of stays in place. So that kind of helps with that.
You know what I did?
What did you do?
I hid total points and I hid percentages. If you go up,
Yes.
Yes.
You can hide them.
that's how my students didn't see that.
Thank you. See, I'm student at this moment, so thank you for teaching me that.
You just go to like this little gear thing and rock and roll. It hides it from YouTube.
So,
All you see is
so in Canvas, you can hide the percentage. No, I was just repeating for the microphone.
Co-liberation, liberate us from our ignorance, please. Yeah.
But no, like hiding the percentage from your students actually is like a huge benefit because then they're not focused on that. And
They
yeah,
don't like it.
yeah. Oh, they hate it. But I just tell them, you just submit and you will be able to get a passing grade.
Yeah, I think this is where I kind of landed with points at this point. I've been doing this for about 5 years, and I've gone, and Julie taught me this. It was like, they're just so comfortable with points that, and I didn't want to be about the points. I wanted to be about the learning. So I went back to like, okay, let's use points as an indication of effort or time commitment that this should be. So there's like some 10-point assignments. Those are like, you should knock that out in 20 minutes. Those aren't going to take you a lot, but I need you to do that. Those are like accountability checks. Like I am reading, I am thinking about these things. And then there's those bigger kind of pieces of assignments. If we're going to do a full grant, the first section is worth 30 points because it should take you a couple hours to really kind of think through that and do a draft. And then really the biggest assignment I have is 100 points, but that's like the final product. But so it's like not a big deal anymore because I explain that this just means a 100-point assignment you should be working on throughout the semester. A 10-point assignment, that's gonna be your reading and 20 minutes of kind of reflecting on a quiz, right? So I'm using points now as Julie taught me to just be like, this is like commitment level, not anything about how important it is because it's all important. Yes, please.
So with that thought in mind, and you're saying it's a 10-point self-reflection, you still get a mark doing over why you gave me 9 instead of 10 on my self-reflection, and how do I get, or
Yeah.
how do you do?
Yes.
Do the match, I guess.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that now. It's the it's this blue box on the screen. It's really embracing what we've embraced is this idea of the revise and resubmit mentality, because that's how like academia works. You don't just get published, you revise, you resubmit, grants, you revise, you resubmit. You get feedback. You're right. You get feedback from your department heads, and you revise what you're doing, and you resubmit things. So it's thinking about. I give my students 2 chances on every quiz. Right? That's the revise and resubmit, because the learning is, and they didn't get it quite right, they go back and look at something and come back and get it right. It's mine's open book. I don't care about whether they memorize. I care about do they know how to learn what they need to know. Also, I do my quizzes. I call them reading integrations. I don't do multiple choice anymore. The first question, there's 2 prompts. The first one is, what stood out to you from the readings? How does it connect to something we've learned in class or in your other classes, and why is it meaningful to you? I have been so pleased with the level of responses that my students give me that are thoughtful. I think it's a little hard for AI too, because they have to like connect some things together that AI might not have the context for. And then my second prompt is, what questions do you still have after this reading that we can talk about in class? That's a great one because it helps me see what's being misunderstood or not gotten by a lot of people. I can see themes. When I read those as a class, I see themes in what they're picking up and what they're confused about, and then we go back in class and we talk about it. So it's not about they got a 9. If they get another chance, right, and then I have let them skip some quizzes, they can drop 2 quizzes. So it's kind of building in that opportunity to fail, which is just the iterative learning process, right? Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, it does. So
Okay.
even on small assignments, they can revise.
Yeah, even a 10-point quiz, you can do it twice, and you can drop your 2 lowest scores. Got a couple other questions. Let's go here.
So, I'm just curious how you mitigate the feedback. Like, is the feedback just
Yeah.
for multiple assignments that you're trying to create more, you know, I mean, summative.
Absolutely.
Versus, you know, like trying to get them to actually learn something where you're not just doing points.
Yeah, that's a great question about the kind of the trade-off between time and feedback and all of those kinds of things. Jesse talked about this a lot. Like, I'm amazed when he says he's never put a grade on a student's paper and he's writing these. I don't write letters to my students. I manage it depending on this. The big assignments I use pairs. I use groups. My students at one point got me a shirt that said life is group work because that's my mantra. They hate group work, but I'm like, that's what life is. You have to work with other people to get things done. So I think for me, I do my feedback where I will read their written work and mark up the margins fairly lightly. And then I found it's really easy to give I do a little 10-minute video where I talk through my feedback really quickly. So they get my tone and my intent. So that to me is the teaching moment. When they submit something based on what I've asked for and I see where they hit it and where they didn't, I give them that feedback. So it is, if you look at the green box, feedback is the central component to all of this. And it is more time consuming. Yeah.
So when you have bigger classes, like with my asynchronous online one with 50 students, when it was the reading reflection, what I would do is I would have on one screen, I'd have the outline of what I expected, and whatever was missing, right, that I was going to take points away from, I'd copy and paste and say, resubmit, and I would put it as a 0. So for those reflections, it was like pass or fail, but it was worth like 10 points. So they either passed or failed. With the fail, I put in there that this piece was missing, revise, resubmit.
Because there's patterns of errors that multiple students make.
And so then that's the feedback that I give on those like shorter, like 10-point assignments. So then that way, instead of like me having to do a 9, I was just 0 or 10. And then I could just punch in that feedback that they were missing in that piece. And in the syllabus, I should have put it up here, but anybody who wants to, just contact me and I'll give you my little blurb. I actually got it from JC. But it's like you have to highlight, this was my feedback, this is where you implemented it into the revision. So then that way I don't have to search through the whole assignment again. And so, but then that makes it really easy. For the bigger assignments, then yeah, I would tend to give a little bit more feedback. And that's where I would tend to spend most of my attention, was on like the big projects. Does that answer your question?
Come to you 1 second. I want to add one thing to that. So Jesse talked about this as well. I ask my students when they submit the larger written pieces, they have to answer 2 prompts when they submit it, which is what did you do well and where do you think you need most feedback? And that I can go, and if they say we did this really well, I can say, great, I agree, you knocked that out of the park. And then they've told me where they think it's weakest, and I can go and say, you know, here's some ways to fix that. I also noticed this other thing if they didn't quite get what I noticed. And so it gives them some self-assessment, and also it guides me, like, what do they care about the most for that assignment? And then Jesse also talked about this, giving whole student feedback versus individual. If I see a lot of errors or the same kind of errors, then I just go back in the next class where I post an announcement. I said, I'm seeing a lot of, I'll do a video for the whole class. I'm saying, this is what I'm seeing in this assignment. I think a lot of you are getting off track here. Think about this. If this is where you got off track, think about this. So you kind of do that group instruction as the feedback to save some time. But I will say the difference between spending my weekend 97, 95, 93 to giving really solid feedback, I felt it changed my quality of life. I enjoyed that moment of like really giving good feedback. It felt more meaningful to me, and I think my reflections from my students at the end of the semester reflect that it does seem more meaningful to them as well. Yeah, go ahead. No.
So where do you draw the line of, so when I'm grading, like, let's say I have 1 or 2 comments of feedback, my idea is that that person would get the 10 out of 10. Where do you draw the line of how many points of feedback that you gave now becomes a 0 out of 10?
That has to come up with you. Like where
That's, you get to draw that line.
so like really that's where it comes into like the assessing. What do you
think is meaningful?
What do you find as meaningful, and what are you hoping that they get out of this assignment? And then if any of those boxes aren't checked, then it's a 0. So then that way you can say like this piece was missing. And when you're writing up your assignment, this is why I'm saying
Yeah.
don't eat the whole elephant, right? Like, start with your reading reflections as ungrading. Those smaller 10-point pass or fail. This is where I'm going to get used to this modality. Really try to figure out like how I want to implement this. And then if you want to implement the revise and resubmit in other pieces, then you can. But then you're still doing the point system with it. But you're allowing that revise and resubmit if you want to implement that next, right? So these are kind of like steps of implementing. But then getting comfortable with your assignments, your assessments, to be able to say, this is why. Like, that I have this assignment in my curriculum, and this is what I'm looking for. So then that way you write the why out in your assessment or in your assignment description. So then if they don't have it, you have something to copy and paste. Also, it gives the transparency to your students of like why this is important. Why do I even have it in my course? And all of those pieces kind of help you to like move towards this idea of grading and ungrading. And it'll give you a chance to kind of get used to that pass and fail or like how you want that to look without changing too much in the course. Because that's what I did, is I went, everything was ungrading, everything is resubmit, everything is pass and fail. And I was just like, oh, I ate way too much of the elephant at once.
And I think the other piece for you, and I don't know your name. What was your name? Annie?
Allie.
Allie. So Allie, I think if you find yourself frustrated between what's a 10 and an 8 and a 7, that's really something to be curious about, because maybe that's an assignment you want to turn into a complete incomplete. Like, you know, there's like 4 things you want them to hit, they hit 3 of them. Well, that's not complete because you needed them to hit 4. Now, worrying about whether that's a 10 or an 8 or a 7, that's irregardless. It's they didn't get it complete. So you give them feedback of like, I saw these 3 things and you need to come back with this thing. And then I'll change your 0 or your incomplete. I like incomplete and complete because it's not that stark 0 that they're like, right? So like, this is incomplete for this reason. That's how I would, if you think about those assignments that are frustrating you as the instructor to give feedback on, those are the ones to get most curious about. And like, how do you actually want to assess for learning? What's meaningful to you? What do you need to see, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Right. Right.
My intent is to do pass fail on these deliverables, but if they get a fail, then they can resubmit.
Absolutely.
They don't have to redo the whole
Yeah.
assignment, they just redo the part that I thought was weak.
Yeah. It's not one and
What I
done.
worry about is I'll have too much grading, I'm worried that
Yeah.
I'm going to be.
I give a time frame for my resubmit. I only give a week for my resubmit.
Yeah. Don't leave it wide open,
Don't
because
leave it
then
wide open.
you'll get a bunch at the end.
Yeah. And so, like, with your resubmit, like, give it within a time limit of what you feel comfortable. Mine is a week. And then that way, like, if they don't get it done by then they just don't. And like he said,
I'm holding this
I know
mic the
you're
whole time
holding
you're
it.
talking.
That's why I'm talking loud.
Yeah.
It'll pick it up.
Okay.
I'm
I
allowed.
like it.
I project pretty good. But like, that's why I like actually using the 0, is so that it sticks out in the grade book,
yeah.
so that the students will actually come back and like read my feedback and hopefully resubmit.
You like
Especially
the
because,
panic that the 0,
well, because it's an 8, like with asynchronous online, I found that that's helpful. For like your Connect or hybrid models, then it's not as needed, like the incomplete works. But asynchronous online, I find that the 0 is actually more impactful. All right, there was a hand up here.
This question. Let me say one thing and then we'll go to your question. Gray box. Try things and then improve. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Alright, so, yeah, I'm just wondering what your grading distribution is at the end of the semester. Is it like bimodal, where essentially you end up with all these people who have A's who have taken advantage of being able to resubmit, and all these people who have F's because even if they submitted an assignment and they didn't revise it, they still get a 0, you know? And at that point, like, does school just become pass-fail? Like,
Yeah. This gets at some of the deep philosophies behind Jesse's work, right? You're into that territory of like, what is the point of all of this? No pun intended on the point. But it is really how are we assessing learning? What is it we're trying to assess? If everybody in my class does the work to revise and resubmit and meets the benchmarks that I've set out and they all get an A, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
What does your grade distribution look like? How do you do that?
So this is a good conversation. Jesse will tell you a lot more about this. So there's this conversation in academia about grade inflation. And it goes back to the roots of what grades are arbitrary. He gave us the history of grades. I know they have meaning because we've given them meaning. So he's challenging the very meaning of the current system, right? So there's this idea of like your colleagues have this grade distribution, and I think Kevin from biology has this issue. He talked about it in his question. Like, are his colleagues like coming for him because like, well, he's just an easy A? Was he an easy A, or is there real learning that's been assessed? It comes back to that fundamental reason about why are we teaching and what are students actually learning. Because like I said, I got 4.0s. And I didn't learn a lot of things in my bachelor's degree, but I gamed the system. So I helped the grade distribution. I had teachers like, we're going to have a grade on the curve. Everybody's going to fit somewhere on this curve. And there was kids that probably earned something, but because he needed a distribution to be. In fact, I got told once that I was a concurrent undergrad student, and I was like, I'm going to give you a B plus. You earned an A, but I'm going to give you a B plus because of my grade distribution. And you don't need this as much as the students that are in majors. That's what he explicitly told me. So the grade distribution, that's a whole long conversation about the philosophy about what the distribution actually means, right? And why we're grading people. Why are we trying to sort people in a particular way? But we are now over time.
Yeah.
So that's a whole year's worth of conversations.
I can talk more like
Yeah.
when.
We'll stick around.
Yeah, because I'm like, because my asynchronous class, my undergrad classes are different than my grad classes.
Yeah.
But-
I guess part of my issue with this is that people are being graded more on their ability to take feedback and revise off that feedback. But what if somebody submits like, deep work their first time submitting it, and they still end up with a 0, and they're just swamped with it?
Yeah, there's a lot more to that. You don't actually have, those are like low-level assignments. On the bigger assignments, it's not a 0. We don't leave those as complete or incomplete. You can still get 80% of whatever the points are for that. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, like in
Yeah.
Jesse, he said like the 3, right? Like the 3 segregated, like this is
Excellent.
excellent, or
Okay, and so that's how you can, this is your adventure, right? This is our story, but you get to choose how you want to do this.
and this is where you can take the low point assignments and like try and implement things, but your big point assignments are still there. Those are still like the ones that you're keeping track of. So if they do get 0s, and yeah, they probably did have like an 8 points out of 10, they're learning. I'm telling you that you should be putting in like this much effort. These are the things that I'm asking for. It's really clear. I gave you the chance to revise. You chose not to, so you chose the 0. This is your accountability.
Yeah.
I met you here. Did you meet me? No. Okay, then I can't help you if you don't meet me. This is your class, your knowledge, your education. You have to step up.
Yeah.
And if you choose not to, then that's what you get. Like that was your choice. And that's big of my pedagogy of just like,
Yeah.
I want you guys to love education and really strive to learn, but I can't, it's like taking a horse to water. I can't make it drink. So here I am, I've come my distance. I put in the work to make sure that like this class has the opportunity for you to fail and still succeed. Are you gonna meet me there? Are you gonna show up?
You're all free to leave at any
Yeah.
time.
Sorry.
You're all free to go. Oh, we have till 4.
Oh, till 4?
Oh, you.
Oh.
Okay, so
But did we have a question?
to this point, to this point though, centering the it's all about centering the learner. They're the only ones that can do the work, and that's breaking the banking model, because the banking model is you're responsible for their learning, and that's not how this works. These ways of doing this means that they have to take responsibility. They have to see themselves as central to the learning versus you didn't teach me well enough.
Yeah.
You have to provide the context and the environment, but this is about them as a learner taking responsibility. And you scaffold it, like Vygotsky would say, and then you walk them to a place where they can do this on their own, right? Where was other people? Yeah.
The part that the yellow box up there makes me nervous, because we got, between retreats and all that stuff, we got maybe 5 more business days before we have to meet our class. And so how did you, as you were transitioning, how did you make a clear and transparent syllabus that
Over-
communicate-
AI.
No. it took me multiple semesters to get where I'm at
Yes.
now.
And really, like, what I did, like, I did the learning circle and I jumped in full force and I like took what I could from where I could. I wasn't using AI at the time, and I was just like implementing things into my course, trying to make it as succinct as I could make it. And then you get like the feedback of like, well, this didn't make sense, and what do you mean by this? And I was putting in a lot of like midterm surveys to being like, do you even know what ungrading is? How is it working for you if you do? So then that way I could get their feedback on like, where was it that I wasn't clear? Now with my, like the transparency and like the syllabus, like if you want, you can take anything from my
Take Jesse's
syllabus.
language up from his
Yeah.
syllabus, like you said.
Jess's language is like amazing, and I wish I had that. So anything you take from that is good. And then really like now with my assignments, I use AI a lot to like put it in and say, this is what I'm trying to state. And can you help like revise this? Is this clear? Where can I be more clear? And it helps me to create a lot of my course assignments and the clarity in my syllabus. And then I put it in as Joe Smo off the street that has no idea of what social work is. They come into my syllabus. Where would they find issue? And it really does help generate, and it takes a lot less time. So with 5 days to go.
So don't do your whole class like I tried
Yes.
to do in the middle of the semester. But the other piece is transparent assignments is there's actual model to framework. So you state the purpose, which is a really good exercise for you as an instructor. If you can't say why they're doing this, why are they doing it? So you have this little clear, like 1 sentence, 2 sentence. The purpose of this assignment is to reinforce this skill or to teach you this thing that connects to this thing. You explicitly say, this is why I'm having you do this. And then you have the task, and you get very clear about what the task for this assignment is. Your task is to do bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And then the next piece of that framework is, here's the criteria for success. I want to see this, this, and this at this level. You can say like, I want this to be at this level, this to be at this level. And then it's very clear why they're doing it, what they're supposed to do, and how it's going to be measured. That was such a good exercise for me as an instructor, because you inherit syllabi, and you're like, why are we having them do this? And you sit down to try to do that, and you're like, oh, this assignment's gone. This is busy work. And the other assignment, you're like, I love this assignment, but how do I actually articulate why we're doing it? Where does it connect to the bigger picture of this class? To me, this whole experience has been for me as an instructor to learn how to be a better instructor. It's really put me in this place of like, I don't actually know why I do that. Let me think about it. AI does help kind of clarify your thinking, but you dump your thinking in first. But start small. Start with one thing. I did this over many semesters. Like I did one class and I tried to clean up that syllabus. And when I got that syllabus pretty good, it's a good model for the next class. And so I built this over 5 years. This wasn't something I did. And like I said, the first time I did this, I blew everybody's mind, including my own, and just tried to dump it all on there. And it was scary for everybody. Yeah.
So I'm kind of on this journey right now, and it's a difficult journey because I'm a math and statistics teacher. And I think it's a lot easier for me to understand how to implement these things if I'm doing a writing class or something. But like when I have all these different, like I have so many very like strict learning objectives that they have to be able to demonstrate to me that they know how to use this algorithm and they know how to answer a question like this. So I've been like trying to figure out the best way to do this, and currently where I am at in this stage of trying to ungrade is I've ungraded the assignments, but I have 4 main tests that they take, and those I still just grade like I would grade any
Just a mix, yeah.
Yeah, and my tests are actually 80% of their grade, which most of the time I would experience students be like, what? And I get very little pushback in my class right now that tests are 80% of the grade, because the way that I've ungraded my assignments helps them to feel that they are prepared for the test. And the thing that mostly the way that I've ungraded my assignments is that I kind of have, because they have to be able to do all these different things, right? So basically I've done it where you get 1 point if you got like 75% on it, and you get 2 points if you get at least 90% on it, and then you can redo it as many times as you want. And then the other thing that I've done to really try to eliminate what students feel is busy work is, it took me a lot of time on the back end, but for 7 different types of assignments for that, and they only need to do like 2 or 3 of them, and so they get to look through and say like, oh, this kind of assignment looks like the way that I would like to approach this, or they look at this assignment and they're like, that's not my vibe. I don't like
Yep.
it, and so they like choose which assignments make the most sense for them, and as long as they get enough points by the end, basically I force them to get 100% in assignments, because if they get 100% in assignments, which is just, you know, get 15 out of the 45 points I've given to you to earn, then they earn all the practice tests that I've created. So where I say, okay, I see that
Nice.
you've put in the time to prepare for this test, so now I'll give you the practice tests for it. And otherwise, they can take the test otherwise, but if they don't earn the practice test, then they just kind of have to take it blind. But that's because I'm already assuming they're taking it blind anyway, because they didn't put in.
That's
Yeah.
a great idea
Yeah,
to
but
step
if they put
that.
in the work, then they come in, and even though tests are 80% of their grade, they're not upset about it because they feel like I prepared them well for it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I know this is challenging for some STEM fields, like how does this work for here? There's a great colleague to connect with on that.
Yeah.
I have both a 5-minute warning and a question.
Oh.
So, in English, I trip over one part of the revise and resubmit part, wherein the semester does end. So, when is your last assignment to give you enough time to give you them feedback and have them have time to